Yeah, I have to agree with you here. The Green Bay defense has just not looked good this season. They've been letting up some high point totals, and with Calvin Johnson and Reggie Bush really forming a formidable pairing on that offensive side of the ball for Detroit, I see them carving up that Packers defense. And we're all pretty familiar with Aaron Rodgers and his group of receivers are able to do. And with that Detroit secondary, we've said it all season, they just can't stop anybody in the passing game, despite their strong front line there. But 52, a pretty high number, but I'd be pretty comfortable with that total and going over. So I have to agree with you on this one. The next one, the second over you like this week, is actually going to be a first in the NFL, I believe, an 11:35 Eastern time start on Sunday night between the San Diego Chargers and Oakland Raiders, and that's due to the Oakland A's game going on Saturday night, and they need 24 hours to switch over the stadium to a football field. And yes, this is 2013, folks, and they do still have places where they play both baseball and football in the same stadium. But that total is at over 44, and again, you like the over in that one.
I do, and it's such a disgusting play. Like I have to hold my nose when I click submit on this one because anytime you're betting the over of a Oakland Raiders game, it's kind of a fishy. But I think I really like San Diego. We talked about them and how Rivers and this new offense seems to be working really well. And I still actually think Oakland's defense has outplayed their talent so far this year. I think they're bound for a game in which they're going to get blown out. And I also think their offense is good enough to score 10 to 13 points, or excuse me, 10 to 21 points. Matt Flynn is what he is. He's a backup quarterback. That all that talk about him being a starter is not ever going to happen. But he can manufacture a couple points. He had a couple nice throws. I
Pryor is actually back this week.
Is Pryor playing this week?
They announced today that Terrell Pryor will be starting for them
Well,
on
then I
Sunday.
really like this bet. That explains why this jumped up a point.
Yeah.
Because this went up to 45, and I was like, I must have just gotten a really good number. But it must have been that announcement. So keep in mind, I picked this with Flynn in mind. So with Pryor, now I like it even more. Now I actually am not as holding my nose when I talk about this game. Pryor's going to put up some points. And I think, I definitely think San Diego's capable of scoring 30 plus in this game. So Pryor puts up 2 touchdowns. I'm thinking this is going to be like a 32-17 kind of game.
Pryor certainly had that offense clicking prior to his injury. He had a couple good weeks there where they were doing the read option a little bit, and he was finding some guys downfield. He found Denarius Moore a couple times. So
The Chargers have been giving up some points too. It's
yeah,
not like their defense has been stout.
no, the Chargers they've been involved in some high scoring affairs. I think 44 is a very reasonable number for that one. So I like where your head's at with that. Moving on, we had the Colts giving 2.5 at home against Seattle. You like Indianapolis in that one. Is this just similar to your Houston play from last week?
It's very similar to my Houston play, and I actually trust Andrew Luck a lot more than I trust Matt Schaub. Seattle is we see they're unbeatable at home. They have the stigma of being one of the best teams in the NFL, but the times they've played on the road, they have looked shaky. They looked shaky in Carolina. They were able to pull away a win. They looked shaky against Houston. Houston choked away the game. I don't think Indianapolis is going to do that. Like I said, it all comes down to quarterbacks now. A guy like Matt Schaub is a guy who's going to throw an interception in the big spot. I trust Andrew Luck to make the big play. I really like what Indianapolis is doing. We talked about this last week, where even though they had a successful season last year, they've kind of changed their entire offense because they understood that playing the way they played last year, they weren't going to have a repeat because it was very fluky. But now they're a power running team. Andrew Luck's not throwing the ball 40 times. He's throwing the ball 25 times. They're running. The defense is playing pretty decent. I think that this is the game where they make a statement saying we're a legit contender in the AFC.
I'm not completely sold on Indianapolis yet, but I think this is similar to last week. It's the same kind of spot where Seattle on the road is just not the same team, and Indianapolis is good enough where they can take advantage of that in some situations. They're working the clock with the running game, and their defense has been playing better in recent weeks. I didn't think going into the season that the defensive unit was a very strong group, but they performed better than expected, and I just think that Seattle was lucky to get away with a win last week. I don't see them doing it again.
Seattle's offense has not been spectacular this
No,
year.
Russell Wilson has struggled in the passing game. They haven't been having him run as much as they did last year, which I think is just to preserve his health, but I don't think it's best in terms of what would make their offense go. And they just don't really have any playmakers at receiver right now, which they tried to rectify with the Percy Harvin trade in the offseason, but with his injury, they're still waiting on his return, and they just don't have a lot of weapons outside of Marshawn Lynch in that offense. So Indy plus 2.5, you like that, and that concludes the NFL slate for this week. You did like one NCAA pick for this week. You
Take
wanted
it with
to
a grain
add,
of salt because I'm over 2 the times I talked about college here.
but it's not a parlay or a teaser. It's just a straight up spread bet. So maybe you'll have better luck with that one in the NCAA ranks.
And like, for those of you listening who don't actually know us, we're from Philly. That's where we live. I've seen a lot of Temple football, and I really think that this team is a chance for Louisville to put together one of those games where they just run up to score. If Louisville wants any chance to play in the national championship game, A, they're going to need some help. But B, they're going to have a couple of games in which they run up to score. And I think that this is a game for them to do so. The spread is minus 34. I see a 40-point win. I'm thinking like 56-17, something like that.
Temple's looked awful this year. They had a couple years there back in the Al Golden era where they looked like a legitimate team. They had a bowl appearance, a 9-3 season, and things were looking up for Temple. But once Golden left, that program has just backslid into just not a good situation. And Bridgewater and that Louisville offense, they can certainly put up points, and I would not be surprised if this is a huge rout. So Vegas is trying to jack it up to 34, but that even seems a little conservative given the talent disparity between these two teams.
So take my college knowledge with a grain of salt. It's not my strong point, but if I were to play any game this week, that would be it.
All right, so you like Louisville minus 34, but your official NFL picks to recap were Cincy Pick'em against the Patriots, Detroit Green Bay over 52, San Diego Oakland over 44, Colts getting 2.5 against the Seahawks. We didn't discuss the Eagles.
Oh, we did not discuss the
No,
Eagles.
and Arizona getting 2 against Carolina. But the final one, which I overlooked here on your pick sheet, was the Eagles getting 2.5 against the Giants. Now, the Eagles just looked god awful against the Denver Broncos last week. Has anything changed since then, or is it just the Giants are that bad?
I think the Giants are that bad. A lot of my views on teams might change this week. I think the Carolina Panthers are not that good, and they were able to destroy the Giants. And the Giants have not had the closest game they played was their first game, and even in that one, they turned the ball over 5 times. I think that the Eagles are going to be able to win this game outright. I'm a homer. I love my Eagles, but I'm not one of those dudes who bets on them every week, and I'm not one of those dudes who only bets on Philly teams. In fact, I made quite a nice amount of money betting against the Phillies this year. I think I'm pretty good at separating my heart from my head when it comes to betting. And I really just think, speaking of the Phillies, that's what the Giants remind me of. A team that they won for a long time with the same guys, so they didn't think to ever get any new ones.
Yeah, kind of past their expiration with some veterans on that team, and just maybe a situation where Coughlin's voice has just been lost in the wilderness after so many years of hearing the same thing over and over again from him, similar to like what Andy Reid had to go through with the Eagles here, where people were just tired of hearing from him. And you got guys like Justin Tuck saying he's going to punch anyone in the face if they speak against Coughlin. So not really the type of things you want to be hearing coming out of your locker room.
And then you have the Eagles, on the other hand, who I think are the kind of the opposite. The Giants are on the way down. The Eagles, they've looked really bad, but I think they're still finding themselves as a team. They're still learning Coach Chip Kelly's new kind of program. He hasn't even busted out anything yet, anything too special, other than the first half in the first game of the year. But I really think that team is working on getting better, whereas the Giants are kind of in a free fall. So I'm going to take the team that I actually think has upside.
I'm pretty impartial as far as how this line goes.
That's how almost everyone I've talked to feels that way.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what to expect from the Eagles at this point. I've obviously watched every game, and I just can't side with them at this point. They just looked so bad at times that I don't know if that
Let
I
me tell
could
you
side with
something.
them.
We can agree that the Eagles should have absolutely won the San Diego game, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if they win that game and they're 2-2, what's the line of this game? Eagles -3?
Probably.
Maybe Eagles -1.5 or
Yeah,
something.
one and a half, I would say.
I mean, a couple. I mean, that's the case a lot of times, where just a couple plays dictate win-loss records, which dictates perception. But just by watching every play of the Eagles this year and watching a lot of the Giants, not every play, I just think the Eagles are better.
Yeah, they very well could be. I just don't trust the Eagles' defense at all.
Which
So
is probably smart.
yeah, so you like the Eagles plus 2.5, and that's the final NFL play of the week for a total of 6 plays. You can check them out. The column will be posted later tonight, Wednesday night, and I'm going to go with the outlet pass segment first.
Can I tell one
but
story real quick though?
yeah, Dan is going to tell one story before he has to head out, and then we'll get into our outlet pass segment.
Last Friday night, I went to bed after a pretty fun night, and I had a dream. And in this dream, this is a true story. I was at the counter in a casino in Las Vegas deciding what games I'm going to bet on. And a shady-looking fella with an overcoat and a top hat came up to me. Kind of looked like Frank Langella for some reason. I don't know where I got that from, but he said, "Yo, kid, bet the Redskins this week." And I was like, "What?" It's like, "Don't ask questions. Just bet the Redskins this week." And then I woke up. The Redskins covered the spread. So if that guy comes to me in any more dreams this week, I will let you guys know on Twitter.
Well, did you follow your dream advice?
I did follow the advice. I only put a half unit on it,
Okay.
but I mean, who knows? Maybe this could be my key for the rest of the year. This guy coming giving me locks in my sleep.
Yeah, instead of angels in the outfield, you have shady figures in the sports book. So yeah, well, be sure to tweet it out if you have any more
How much of a degenerate does that make me that that's what I dream of?
being in a sports book and betting on football
And
games.
shady guys telling me what are locks and which games are rigged.
Hey, as long as it wins. So, we'd like to thank Dan for joining us again for week 5. Again, check out those plays on PhillyFastBreak.com. And thanks for being on, Dan.
Anytime. See you guys next week.
I'm going to handle the outlet pass segment solo. Dan had to exit the place. So, our reader question this week comes once again from friend of the podcast, Kirill Platnick at KMax732. He asked us, is Michael Carter-Williams going to develop enough of a mid-range game to be a legitimate NBA point guard? And that's a good question because that's pretty much what's going to make or break his NBA career. It's the linchpin of his game. It's the one glaring weakness that he has. The guy has great size, obviously 6'6" as a point guard. That's amazing. Works his change of speed well, similar to what Chris Paul does, where he's not the fastest guy in the world, but he knows how to use that hesitation dribble, change of speed to get into the lane and create opportunities for himself on the offensive end. And he has very good court vision. He's a good passer, but as an NBA point guard anymore, obviously you have to be, if not an elite shooter, you have to be able to keep defenses honest from the outside. And in college, he shot, in his freshman year, he shot 43% from the field and 39% from the three-point line, which, it's okay. That's average, perhaps. But in sophomore year, he actually regressed to 39% and 29% from three. And there's a lot of talk from his coaches in college that they were trying to have him raise his release point so it wasn't as easily blocked by athletic defenders at the collegiate level. And the reports were that trying to switch his release point kind of messed with it. You know how you might mess with a golf swing if you're trying different things out. And sometimes he was doing it correctly, sometimes it was reverting to the old way of doing things. And just kind of being unsure about that was having some negative consequences with his game. And then we saw in Summer League, although he did some things well down in Orlando for the Sixers Summer League team, he still only shot 27% from the field and 16% from the three-point line, which are not very encouraging totals. So, at this point, the jury's still out. Carter Williams seems like he's a good kid. He seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders. He's willing to work hard at it. But we just haven't seen enough for that to think that he's going to ever be a quality shooter at this level. Certainly, he could be a guy coming off the bench. He's a good ball handler. Maybe he could progress to the point where he's a starting point guard for a team. But as far as ever being a starter for a contending team, I would have to say no. We saw in the playoffs last year where anytime guys would come out and as part of an offensive unit that they didn't have a shooter on the court, then teams would just sag off that player and just clog the lane for everybody else and would just bog down the offense. Prime example of that was Tony Allen with the Grizzlies last year. He's not a good outside shooter, so teams were just leaving him alone, and that was just ruining everything Memphis wanted to do on offense. So for your starting point guard to be a guy like that, where teams aren't even going to respect his outside shot, that's just not something you can do, and if you want to be a contending team. So to answer the question, of course, there's always a possibility. He's got to work hard at it. Maybe he can progress to the point where he is a quality shooter and can at least get by and make teams respect the jumper. But based on all the available evidence at this point, I have to say no. So thanks for the question, Kirill, and everybody else, be sure to submit your questions either via Twitter or via email, and we'll answer them in next week's podcast. So that ends the Week 5 NFL wagers. Thanks again to Dan for coming on earlier, and thanks to all the listeners out there. Have a good week.